Welcome back. Hope you all had a good time to relax, and I believe that you are ready for the second session on design thinking by Dr. Navin Bhagalkot. Let me introduce and welcome Dr. Navin Bhagalkot, Associate Dean, Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology. Dr. Navin Bhagalkot is a researcher and teacher trained in the field of human computer interaction, HCI, and interaction design. He is trained as an architect, industrial designer, and holds a PhD in interaction design from the IT University of Copenhagen. At Srishti, Sir's research inquires and explores the intersection in digital technology. In particular, Sir takes a critical yet constructive strand through exploring alternative responsibilities for localized and participatory design of self-tracking and data-driven digital physical infrastructures. Sir is driven by the act of system design and sketching performed in close collaboration with organizations. Sir also leads the Bachelor and Masters in Human Centered Design as Srishti, where his focus has been to create an environment of learning through which the students can enhance the horizon of their emerging practice as interaction designer towards impacting communities at a grassroots, localized level. Sir is an active member of international and Indian HCL research communities, volunteering as program and organizing committee member and reviewer for international and national conference. In particular, he is excited to mentor and curate student research work within HCI and interaction design. Today's third topic on design thinking is going to kindle the spirit of all the fashion faculty to learn and incorporate their day-to-day teaching by giving importance to creative thinking and innovation in design. Nite School of Fashion Technology and Interior Design, in association with Bengaluru Central University, is honored to welcome Dr. Navin Bhagalkot, Associate Dean, Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology, for the second day, second session of the first of the kind 6-day virtual faculty development program with the topic Fashion Design and Approach Through Creative Thinking. Sir will be starting the session with the topic on design thinking. Mike, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Pusha ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts on design thinking. I believe I have about roughly an hour and a half, and I'm really sorry that uh, my biography itself took almost 20% of the time. Um, yeah, I should have made it a bit more shorter. No, I
That's
think
right.
anyway, it's
Our
okay.
pleasure.
But okay, let me start sharing my screen now. And okay. Um, can you all see my screen now?
Yes, sir. So can you
Okay.
put it in the
I'll do that. I'll do that.
slideshow? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Cool. So great. I'll be talking about design thinking, but also talking about where, I mean, I'll start with saying where it is coming from, what are the principles of design thinking, and and also look at what are the possibilities that design thinking offers as for design disciplines, and also think through a bit about its limitations as it stands. Right, and I'm okay if anyone wants to interrupt me and ask me a question. And the thing is, I mean, I usually love to do this in person, but because of the times we have to do this online, and right now it looks like I'm back in my boarding school when I had to prepare speeches, as part of the debate team, and I had to look myself in the mirror and read out my speeches. It just feels the same, I'm just looking and talking to myself, and I really don't like that form. So let's see how we can make it a bit more interactive. And I'll take a lot of breaks in between, and we'll hopefully have it more of a discussion, and hopefully you all will be able to bring your own ideas and experimentations with design thinking in your own practices with this to this session. Um, can everybody hear me clearly? Is that all okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's all fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. Um, so I'll start with a story. Um, this is my favorite story. So I since it's been a while now, 2 years since I've not done this. But before that, I used to for 3 years I used to plan and conduct a workshop in rural parts of Udaipur, and this was with Lakshmi Murthy, whose work and organization I'll talk a bit more later in the session. Who's a very senior designer, but who works with in rural and adolescents, teenagers in rural and tribal parts of Rajasthan, in the districts of Udaipur and Rel Magra. And I and Lakshmi offer this workshop on future of design, and this story is from the first of the workshop. So the workshop is basically 2 weeks. So and I have usually about 15 to 20 of my masters in design students with me, and we go there, and it has about three parts of to it. The first part is my students get an in-depth understanding of the life systems of the rural parts, of how people live, and what are their visions of technology and change, and things like that. And the second part, which is the most important part, is we have a residential workshop, which is we stay in a place, and we invite about 15 to 20 rural and tribal adolescents to stay with us for 5 days and 4 nights. And so my students. So, and then over those 5 days and 4 nights, I and Lakshmi facilitate them through a design workshop. And there are different themes every year, and mostly we work with themes around bodies and knowing your own bodies, and sexual education, because that's what is Lakshmi's work. But the first time we ever did it, because of the sensitive nature of the topic, and because we were doing it, and this was in 2016, we decided to look at smart city, right? And this story is about, and the idea is that groups of students, both my students and the students from the kids from the villages. I say kids, but they're basically teenagers from 14 years old to 17, 18 years old. And they come together in smaller groups, and they work it's like a very typical design exercise. You have a challenge and you address it through some sessions, and you imagine a future, and you make models out of it. So this is about imagination of Udaipur, which is now designated as a smart city, and Udaipur that where cows coexist with humans, right? So the this was actually came the vision came through a couple of 13 and 14 years old kid and a couple of my students. These kids were very moved when we took them to an action aid center in Udaipur, where uh, animals, urban animals that are left to die, are cared for. Dogs and donkeys which have been undergone accidents, cows and buffaloes who have been eating a lot of plastic and stuff like that. And they saw how a buffalo dies when there are plastic inside it, and they were actually very shocked, because for them, they live with cows around and buffaloes around them, and goats and sheep, because they're from villages, and it's part of their everyday life. They get up, they get the grass to the sheep, and go to school and come back, and then sometimes they also take the cows to the grazing land, and where they have their smartphones, and they look at their stuff and then come back. So, this group imagined a smart city where there is equal, if not less, space and place for cows on the streets of Udaipur. And they'll not eat plastics, but they'll be, and then they imagined an entire backend of leaf plates and delivery systems around, using natural leaf-based plates and cutlery for the. I mean, most of the plastic that comes in Udaipur street is from tourism, and that's what the cows eat. So they imagined, radically reimagined that, and then so how it could bring in more, cow population in the streets, become more, eat, basically, don't eat plastic, but eat the uh, the green plates, and eat what they can digest. So I'm going to share this story, and I'll come back to this. For me, there are important lessons that we have to hold dear, hold on to in this story, in the vision of a smart city for cows. So now, design thinking is basically, I mean, it has been everywhere now. Stanford D School has made it famous. I'll come to those people who made it very famous. There's Harvard Business Review. It has been taken up by businesses left, right, and center, who all want to claim, and then governments too. The UK government, and increasingly the Indian government, is talking about design thinking, and they all pitch of design thinking as the best way to manage change, and as a strategy. Uh, there's interesting experiments that happen also about design thinking for self-improvement, right? How you can improve design thinking, your own life, and how you can become a better you. So there is a clear sort of an evolution of design, from design to design thinking, and then businesses have co-opted it, and it's an amazing sort of a frame to sell. And I'm actually thinking that this will be a really good business if I go into design thinking as a spiritual mode of bettering yourself. And I'll be earning huge crores of monies and lands, given that we're in India. Uh, So, but what is important is we need to really unpack what is design thinking, right? And there are two parts to it. One is design, and one is thinking, right? So, do anybody here want to, kind of throw up in the chat, or in here, unmute yourself and suggest what you think is design thinking? I'm just trying to figure out how to access chat, but.
You can see the people beside that, it's that chat.
No, I know. Yeah, no. Okay. So, right. Okay. Concept development. That's one. Anyone else want to talk about what is design thinking? Go ahead. Somebody had unmuted themselves. Design thinking is an iterative process which also incorporates system thinking with special emphasis on empathy. Yes, that's a very good definition. It kind of touched on all the key concepts of design thinking. Innovative idea, imaginations converted in a visual manner, right? Okay. So yeah, I think we are getting a sense of that. But uh, if you Google image search design thinking, right, you will get all these models. Which, if you really look at it, then it's basically these stages of design. It is presented as the process of design. It's presented. If you look at the center here, the red wiggly diagram, this is a very famous diagram of a typical design process where there's a very messy, uncertain front end, and then there's a very linear, straightforward back end. And this process is also imagined as a double diamond process, which you can see in the far right corner of the image. I don't know if it's the right or left, but yeah, it's the right corner. There are these two diamond rhomboid shapes, where the idea is that you expand and then you come back, and then you expand, you come back, and whatever you're expanding is on ideas, and then there are these phases, right? You empathize, you define, ideate, prototype, test. um, this is your famous, I'll come to that, who came up with this. But basically it's about, you understand, you define what the problem is, you come up with a lot of creative ideas, you use the method of prototyping and testing to figure out which is the better idea here in this for this specific problem. So design thinking then offers a very specific way of thinking that is not necessarily, let's say, engineering thinking or other ways of thinking about change, right? So, but let's try to understand design thinking from the person, from the people who actually started it, in articulating it in a way that and laying claim to the definition, right? And they would be IDEO. So IDEO is a firm by David Kelly and others, which actually started off in Stanford and Silicon Valley, and then they were product designers, and then they brought that design language to software systems. And it is important to note how and why we all follow IDEO's notion of design thinking, uh, because I'll come to that later. But I just want to highlight here that the reason why we follow IDEO's notion of design thinking is because it is linked to how software is designed, imagined, designed, and sold all over the world, right? So I'll elaborate this later on, but right now let's just look at what do they mean by design thinking. Okay, now I'm going to see if I'll stop sharing this and I'll share, because there's this video by David Kelly, and I'll see if we can watch it all together. And okay, so now I have to share a Chrome tab. Exploration and materialization. I like that one. Okay. Okay, can you all see this tab of mine? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So this is David Kelly, and let's see if you can also hear what he says.
Design.
Can you all hear?
Yes, sir, we can hear.
Super, okay.
Yeah.
Design thinking is an approach to creative problem solving. It's a human-centered path to innovation.
Hello, I'm David Kelly. I'm happy you're here to explore design thinking with IDEO. You know, so many people don't think of themselves as creative, but I think that's wrong. Everybody's creative. And that's one of the reasons we teach design thinking, because we think that knowing this kind of approach can unlock your creativity and make you feel capable of coming up with routinely wonderful ideas.
Design thinking starts with people. It's about putting human needs at the center of all we do. It's about simple mindset shifts, and new ways of looking at problems through empathy and collaboration. For an idea to be both successful and meaningful, we use 3 lenses to bring it into focus: desirability, feasibility, and viability. This ensures we're creating something that makes people's lives better, but that's also feasible to produce and makes good business sense. There are many different phases of design thinking. We find it helpful to teach it in a linear way, but in practice, it's more like this. Design thinking unfolds in iterative loops, moving back and forth across phases, some taking much longer than others. To learn it, you need to try it out for yourself. The skills and mindsets of design thinking can help you tackle your biggest challenges and build your creative confidence. Once you put it into practice and make it your own, who knows what important problems you might solve.
Okay. Well, that kind of gave us a bit of what does IDEO think design thinking is, and also I guess we got sold about what IDEO can do to your firms and businesses. But let me go back to the okay. Okay, so just kind of taking words from that video, design thinking is creative problem solving approach, keeping the human needs at the center, not just looking at technical viability, but also looking at desirability and whether it is actually needed. And then it's using designers' abilities and tools and way of doing things in order to anticipate and manage a change that is desirable, right? So the question here then is about what are these designers' tools and abilities and ways of doing things. That's one. And the second is, why is design a better option of trying to anticipate and manage change? And what is this notion of desirable and where it is coming from? So, I mean, design as we know it, the modern product design and industrial design is evolved through, at least for our sake, it's evolved through 2 kind of broad strands. One is European and one is the American sort of ways of looking at things. And due to, again, the prevalence of Silicon Valley in these times and the software industry, the American notions of design have taken more sort of prominence, and that's why design thinking is part of that. But Herbert Simon, he was a professor, I think at MIT, who wrote this phenomenal book called as The Sciences of Artificial, set the foundation for what we know in modern times as the engineering design. But a lot of what we understand as product design is also was coded in this book, and he defines design as moving from is to formulate a series of actions that will take us from our current state to a preferred state. Right. So design then is about trying to foresee the future. There is a future out there that is preferable, that is desirable, that is better than the current state. And design is both to foresee that, to imagine that future, and devise a series of actions that will take us from the current state to the preferred or the desirable state. So that's basically, in a very simple terms, that's what is design, right? So let's now think about it from how does it look in practice in some way, and David Kelly talks about it as empathy and experimentation. So let's take a look at what does this mean. Okay, and I came across this case study when I was learning industrial design at IIT Bombay in about 13 years back, 15 years back, I don't know, 2005, 2007. And this is a phenomenal case study. It's on YouTube. I'm going to show you a bit of it, not the entire thing, but you can watch it anyway later on. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and then I'll share the YouTube link here. It's called as Deep Dive, and if you search it on YouTube, you'll get it. It's a 22-minute thing, and it is a TV program documentary.
Program. We went to IDEO, the product design folk, and said, take something old and familiar, like, say, the shopping cart, and completely redesign it for us in just 5 days. ABC News correspondent Jack Smith tells us what happened next.
9 in the morning, day one. These people have a deadline to meet.
So welcome to the kickoff of the shopping cart project.
This is Palo Alto, California, in the heart of Silicon Valley. And these are designers at IDEO, probably the most influential product development firm in the world. Designers are the reason TVs have square screens, chairs 4 legs, and toothbrushes nowadays those squishy handles. In fact, it was IDEO that designed those squishy handles. IDEO has designed everything from high-tech medical equipment to the 25-foot mechanical whale in the movie Free Willy and the first computer mouse for Apple. Smith ski goggles, Nike sunglasses, NEC computer screens. Hundreds of products we take for granted.
This is called the Neat Squeeze toothpaste tube, which...
You invented that? The man who runs IDEO is Dave Kelly, a Stanford engineering professor with a Groucho Marx mustache, a dad of genius, and an approach to innovation that usually works.
Well, thank you, Fred.
But not always.
I can show you some products that failed. Came up with this idea called monster shoes, where you take these little monsters and lace them into your shoes, like this. And we built a bunch of them, and I didn't want those either. So.
Mostly what IDEO designs, though, does work, and it works very well. Dave and his design teams create about 90 new products every year.
The point is that we're not actually experts at any given area. You know, we're kind of experts on the process of how you design stuff. So we don't care if you give us a toothbrush, a toothpaste tube, a tractor, a space shuttle, you know, a chair. It's all the same to us. We want to figure out how to innovate by using our process, applying it.
And so for the next 5 days, the team will apply that process to bringing the supermarket shopping cart into the 21st century.
I think first we should maybe all acknowledge that it's kind of insane to do an entire project in a week.
Project leader is Peter Skillman, a 35-year-old Stanford engineer. Project leader because he's good with groups, not because of seniority. He's only been at IDEO for 6 years. The rest of the team is eclectic, but that's typical here. Whitney Mortimer, Harvard MBA. Peter Coughlin, linguist. Tom Kelly, Dave's brother, marketing expert. Jane Fulton-Suri, psychologist. Alex Kazaks, 26, a biology major, who's turned down medical school 3 times because he's having too much fun at IDEO.
Kids climbing up and doing this.
Kids do that.
Safety emerges early as an important issue.
22,000 child injuries a year, and so they're hospitalized injuries. I mean, there are many others.
That's what's reported in the store. You actually have to go to the
that's
emergency room.
hospitalized, right.
And theft. It turns out a lot of carts are stolen.
You know, what is the average life of a cart? Is it like 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? And how big is this theft thing?
10 a.m. As the team works, it becomes clear there are no titles here, no permanent assignments.
The other side gives us a lot of help, says, be safe.
Everyone appears to be equal, and they love to mock corporate America.
I'll give you status.
Okay, so I will stop here because I just wanted to highlight what it means to do design thinking. I highly recommend you all to watch the entire thing of 22 minutes. It's an amazing case study, though it will read and feel as if it's a promotional of IDEO. But despite that, I would say it is valuable to go through that video. Right. So the key things, can anybody share in the chat or unmute themselves and share what do you think that key things came across in that video about design thinking, in that brief glimpse? Um, did you hear the question? Is that clear?
Design is open in all products. Design is open in all products. Design is an integral part of every product.
Right, that's one. Design is an integral part of every product. Somebody says here that the needs of consumers was the priority. Yes. What else was what else did you find interesting in that brief part of the video? Manipulating product for comfort and safety, yes. But teamwork, attention to smaller issues, cater to the need of end use. Yes. Yes. Right. So I think one of the key things that for me is the notion of empathy and experimentation. And empathy was about, as you rightly mentioned, they could perceive the needs of the consumers or the end users in a very uh, direct and tangible ways, and to identify problems. And the way they solved the problem was through experimentation. Which, if you watch the entire thing, you'll see how they do it. Which actually in design, it's not so. I mean, it's basically any design process where you do a lot of trial and error. You mock it up. You use different materials to, and then you enact it out, sort of different ways. So that's pretty much design thinking in very simple ways, right? So what I'll do now is I'll show you a bit more on empathy and experimentation through some of my own work, so that it kind of brings some sort of a relevance to the context that we are in. So this is the work that I did as part of in 2007, when I just finished my master's in IIT Bombay, and I had a job offer from Tech Mahindra, but I didn't want to go into corporate India yet. And I wanted to do research, and a professor of mine, Andrita Joshi, he had a grant from Nokia. Nokia back then was really, yeah, the leader. And they wanted to understand, this was a research grant, and they wanted to understand how do people with low literacy levels in rural India use the phones, and is there any way that we can design these phones for their specific context. And we are a team of people. We also published this article, which you can look it up, based on this research, where we looked at how do people with low literacy levels. The particular focus we started off with is how do they save contact numbers? How do they save and access the contact numbers, and what is the sort of phone diary application on their phone? So we went and we knocked onto we took trains out of Mumbai to Kalyan and Karjat and beyond, and we went to different households. We looked at different instances of how they save the numbers, what are the ways in which they do things, what are the patterns that we can find from them, what are the challenges that they have, and then we kind of came back, and then we realized that we could actually one of the ideas that we had was we could map the keypad numbers, because it's a fixed keypad. And we could use that with couple of colors and shapes to help them save and recall the numbers very easily. So all they need to remember is a color and a shape. So the way it worked is basically you have this is what you see on the screen, but it says that if you press 1, you'll get to find. If you press 2, you can add a new number, right? And then once you press 2, for example, you get or 1, you get this color pad on the screen and then you can either press 1, whatever color you need, and then then it opens up into the shape, and then the shape is a heart, and then that will be the number that you have saved. What we actually found is that a lot of people had annotated their numbers with these shapes. Like a heart. Usually the sun, they're given a heart. A home was a home kind of a shape. So we kind of just piggybacked on that. and we did multiple iterations of this idea, which is more detailed out in the paper. But the prototype was not ready. I mean, we couldn't code it in that time, but we did mock-ups, and we did this sort of paper mock-ups, and we asked the people to assign some numbers and recall it. And then that was a test that we did, how fast, as compared to existing phone books application, how fast can you do it? And then we iterated on the design itself, that we can it be, instead of a square, can it be a house? What could be these colors and stuff like that. So this is just to show that how across different design products, whether it's a digital product or a physical product, basically it's a very simple process of trying to understand people, trying to go and observe them, talk to them, and see how they look at the world and what issues that they face. It's not so much as asking them, hey, what's your problem, because it's very hard to articulate a problem, but is to understand through patterns. We did a whole lot of, like, we didn't, it was a qualitative research, so we talked about 10 families, 10 to 12, but we had immense amount of qualitative data to look at really what are the patterns that the way people use these numbers, and how do they save it, and how we can help them translate that onto a phone platform without losing out on the essence of the paper. So and that kind of gave us the creative spark, and then again it was a couple of iterations of that idea itself, and not necessarily that you always have to build it. You can also mock it up using paper prototyping, using enactments and mock-ups, right? So this notion of iteration comes from another perspective of design, which is by Donald Schoen, who talks about the reflective practitioner. Donald Schoen was a psychologist, philosopher, who looked at, also from MIT, who looked at creative professionals and started to understand how do creative professionals get educated? What is in their education that makes them creative, right? So one of the things that he talks about is that the key part of being creative is constant experimentation and exploration. Which is, you constantly try to make things, you constantly look at it from different perspectives, you constantly change things and see what happens. That basic essence of experimentation is at the heart of design as such, right? So now you take that creativity and then you add it to a process that will help you empathize with your end customer, and then you have design thinking, basically. So now let's take a look at, that's one way to do it, right? So you go out there, you study people, you observe people, and you come back and then you design something, and then you go back again, you put it in place, see how people are using it, you learn from it, again you come back, you design something, and you go back, right? So and then what you're designing is for a whole sort of people, right? You don't design a shopping cart for one person. A shopping cart has to be used by many people. You don't design a mobile application for one people. It has to be used by many people. So that's the kind of the role that design plays within a sort of a mass manufacturing capitalist system. What's it? Okay. So I'll quickly share maybe. Let's just see. I'm just trying to see if I can manage the time. Oh yeah, okay, we can share this. You all are still seeing my screen, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So one other way to look at it is to look at design as an approach to frame a problem, as well as explore the solutions to that problem. And in doing that, you develop empathy, and you do that through a collaborative exploration of both the problem space and the solution space. Okay.
Sorry, sir. Sorry to disturb. Are you sharing any PPT, sir?
Yeah. Is it not being seen now?
No,
You only see me.
Yes.
Okay. Sir. Did you see the? Okay. When? I totally forgot. Okay. since when I've not shared. This one, did you see?
Which one, sir?
This slide?
Huh? No, sir, no.
Huh. Okay, so since then I've been talking and you're only looking at me.
Yes. It's okay.
Okay, okay, this is the project that I was talking about, the Rangoli project. So I'll just go through the slides again because I thought you were able to see and you could make sense of what I was talking. Please interrupt me if these things don't.
Yes,
Because
sir, sure.
yeah. So this is what I was saying. So we looked at different set of how people use their phone diaries to enter and navigate between physical diaries and mobile phones. And this is how we came up with these ideas. This is what I was talking about, the combination between the number pad and the color and the shape. So if I have to remember, one way to remember that to a number, I just need to remember the color and the shape, or the number, right? 1 and 5. So if I press 1 and 5, I know that I will be able to get the number of my son. Or, I mean, son is easy to remember, but still. This was back in the time when we didn't remember it. People were still, kind of transitioning from landline or having no phone to a very simple Nokia phone, which used to come at around 1,500 rupees, 2,000 rupees with that snake game. So, and then the idea, the way we tested it was this kind of paper prototyping and mocking it up, as you can see here. This is the book that I was talking about by Donald Schoon, which talks about reflective practitioner and again, I would suggest maybe you can take a look at this book to understand how creative professionals think in action, which is at the heart of design thinking. So, as I was saying, a designer usually frames the problem and explores the solutions hand in hand. If you see that the messy front line diagram, that messiness is because we designers don't first define a problem and then explore the solution. They kind of do it together in the first early phases, right? Before then they say, this is the solution, this is the prototype, we'll have to then iteratively test it. So what Schoon brings forward is that we can empathize through a bit of a back and forth of collaborative exploration. And one example that I wanted to give you was from my PhD work, where I worked with one woman and her husband in Maharashtra. My PhD was in Denmark, and I was exploring how do technologies that help senior citizens track their exercises at home can be designed in a much better way. And these senior citizens are usually people with who have to undergo rehabilitation, like a knee replacement or a hip replacement and stuff like that. And how can wearable technologies or tangible technology could be part of their environment so that they can enable a bit more tracking of what or exercises have they been doing, how they've been doing, and sharing it with their therapists and for feedback. I did a couple of explorations in Denmark, and then I thought it'll be really interesting to explore these ideas in India. And then I found this woman who had undergone both her knees replacement at the age of 75. She lived in about 80 kilometers away from Pune. Her doctor was in Pune, and she was quite active for a person with both her knees replaced. And so through multiple interviews with one person, we figured out that she does the swing in the garden where she moves back and forth lightly to exercise her knees. And we started exploring how that could be. We could think of how she can quantify this and keep a track of that in terms of numbers. So we made a mat with some sensors, which you can use it on the swing and keep it and then swing on it so that it records her motions. And we were wondering how this data could be presented to her. And when I say we, it was me, one more person, and this woman and her husband, right? So we did it together as a group. And for her, the amount of time spent on the swing really doesn't matter, because she listens to a music program when she's doing it, and that itself gives her a sense of time. Also, she has built an awareness that if she's not doing it regularly, if she skipped for a couple of days, then the knees, she feels that her knees are becoming more rigid, the flexibility is reducing. So she has an innate sense of that her body has learned about her actions that she has to learn, and then go back to doing her exercises, right? So at the same time, she was a very active participant of a bhajan mandal, and her house is filled with a lot of trophies. Um, at the same time, she misses being that center of the attention of the community, but she is also an expert now of a knee replaced patient. She is an expert patient because she has successfully managed to be active 5 years after her knees being replaced, and she does all the housework herself, does exercises, and she's a model patient. So and people around her come to her to seek suggestions and stuff like that. So we then decided that it'll be much better if we showcase this data of her exercise as part of a trophy that she keeps in her living room. So we made that up, and then it's a basic LED display that lights up whenever she uses the swing, and switches off slowly after the usage, about like over 8 hours, and then comes back again like a lamp sort of a thing. But the text there reads, congratulates her for being a successful and a model patient. We also put her name and her husband's name, and then that looking at his name, that triggered a whole lot of um, uh, her husband to share with us a whole lot of ways in which he is a key part of her rehabilitation. Usually when we design for patients, we only look at one person as a patient, and we usually tend to forget the role of their caregivers, and the stress on them, and the kind of modifications they have to do in their routines in order to care for their partners. And so we learned a lot about how the husband cared, which gave us a lot of insights. So one way to empathize, and through this we actually empathize with both this woman and her husband, is through design, through making and experimenting and collaboratively exploring a future together, so that past and current activities that are usually hidden will also be revealed. And that's how we gain a more closer sense of what it is to be this woman, and what it is to be this woman's husband, and how do their day in a life look like. And that's a key part of empathizing. Any questions for now? I'm going to take a short 2-minute break now, because the next I'm going to move into looking at, I have now outlined what is design thinking, what are its ways of doing design thinking, and how it can be really powerful to addressing a lot of interesting issues that we face. And now I'll be moving into a bit of limitations of design thinking. So before I move there, I was thinking if any one of you have any questions. Okay, there's a question here. There's a question about any tools for empathy. Well, actually, you can look at IDEO. They have a whole range of tools that will help you to how do you empathize with someone. There's something called as empathy map. That basically it all means you need to go out there and you need to observe and study people, the kind of people that you're designing for, right? And you need to work with them, you need to understand them through different means of ethnographic research or observation research, or and then you bring these tools back, and the tools is you map a day in a life, or you do an empathy mapping, and you do persona, for example. Persona is one of the other way to look at how do you capture empathy, and you bring that back to your design table, right? But empathy is also about having a deeper understanding of human beings and trying to be not judgmental in any ways, right? So you need to kind of leave that judgment behind and look at why do people do what they do. So that becomes a sort of a guiding principle. But I can share some toolkits, later on. It's very specific toolkits. Any other questions? I can need a 5-minute break, but you can start questions or maybe even discuss. You know, it need not be you all asking me and I responding. You could also discuss if you have any, if you want, if anybody wants to share their um, ideas or what they have been working on and how they have been trying to empathize in their design practice.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
So, I have been like introduced for design thinking from a PG. I did it in NIF Mumbai, and we had an good introduction to design thinking. So the problem with us is now being into academics and research. The thing is, we get to have a lot of qualitative data inputs while you do an empathy mapping or persona mapping and everything. But then, like, how do you like what group in or like you funnel down the data? Like you get different qualitative data from all your approaches, but then how do you funnel it down? And in case if you're trying to publish it somewhere, like how do you like see mostly all this research papers or journals, like they need something to quantify data. So how
Right.
do you do it?
Thank you. Anybody wants to respond to that? Anybody here wants to or add to those questions or respond? No? Okay. Okay. So there were a couple of questions, right? One is, how do we stop? Yeah. Where do we stop?
Yeah.
And the second is about the qualitative versus the quantitative and how do we publish?
Yeah.
So I'll address the second question first. It's actually a wrong notion that journals only accept quantitative stuff. There's a lot of research out there that is extremely qualitative, and anthropological journals, even design journals. There's International Journal of Design, which is open source. There's design studies from MIT. All of them, co-design, almost all of them, there's hardly any quantitative work in design, right? When you publish, for example, in more sort of computer science or in more sort of engineering journals, they want quantitative. But so that's why it's important for us to choose who are our audience of our research, right? Who are we publishing this for? And that's why, yes, exactly. Most design-related studies are qualitative because it's about empathizing. And empathy cannot be obtained through quantitative, right? And even, well, yeah. I would also argue that it's very hard to empathize even with a larger group of people. But anyway, I'll keep that aside. I have my own opinions about empathy. But there's a whole lot of qualitative studies accepted in journals, that you can definitely take a look at, and even conferences. So it's a wrong notion. So it's just about trying to figure out who are your audience, first of all. I agree that not every qualitative study needs to be quantified. I think it all comes back to the purpose, and that's where I'm going to, and that's how I'm going to address your first question. So the purpose is, why are we doing this study, first of all? So if our focus is that we need to design a product better, there's the product out there, we need to design a better product so that people can use it, then that's a focus. So for that, we need to formulate a research plan about how many people, who are our target audience, how many people are we going to need. And usually in a qualitative study, it all comes down to, if the patterns are repeating, then we stop the study, right? And then the focus then is, in this kind of research, which is called as research for design, is very much about trying to find gaps, trying to find problems, trying to find opportunities for design. For example, in the Rangoli book, our research was very focused on how do they save and store numbers. That's it. So anything beyond that, we didn't really look into. And we stopped when by 10 to 12 people, the patterns were repeating. There were nothing new that we found. And that's the qualitative sense making. That's from grounded theory, right? And then how do you code that data is also then dependent on your purpose, right? If I was an anthropologist or an ethnographer, I wouldn't be so much interested in informing the design process. I would just share it as a knowledge that will help people understand how people save numbers. But as a designer, then I had to say, this is the gap, and this is an opportunity for design. This is where a product or a technology can come in and help. And then you begin the design of the product or technology, right? So that's somehow, I hope, that addresses your question. It all kind of comes down to the purpose of why you're doing the research. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can you put light on a brief history of design thinking? Huh. Okay, what I'll do is I'll suggest, in my slides, there are a couple of books upcoming. I've not written them, but good friends have written them, which will help you on understanding the history of design thinking. Okay. So I think I'll quickly move on to the next parts of the talk. Okay. But at the same time, actually, design thinking has been heavily critiqued, design and design thinking, because it creates more problems than it can solve, right? Because it does offer a very narrow focus of a product or a system. It excludes and disciplines. When I say disciplines, it makes people behave in a certain way, and that's disciplining. And it also perpetuates a status quo. It doesn't challenge. Most of these problems come because that design thinking is industrial design, the modern industrial design and design thinking are evolved and are still part of the capitalist industry production, right? Which is basically, in very rudimentary sense, a small number of people imagine, produce artifacts, products, and consumables so that a larger set of people use them, consume them to gain profits. So as much as designers claim that we are trying to build products that will help solve people's issues, but the ultimate goal is that by solving those issues, the corporations that we work for will make profits out of it. And unless design kind of challenges this, we will still be continuing and perpetuating these issues. So, and when somebody asks, I can hear myself. That's nice. Okay. So the two books, and there's an emerging critique, but these are very recent books, which are very important, I think. And Design Justice by Shasha is available. 5 chapters of it are available on MIT Press site for free. And Chasing Innovation by Lily Irani is also, the e-PDF is available for free. So you can download it and read it. These both books, as examples, talk about how design thinking and IDEO way of design thinking have actually led to a huge number of problems of exclusion across the world. And Lily's book especially looks at how do product design happens in India and how a lot of it is controlled by the imagination and influence of Silicon Valley. Okay, so these are important books for us to rethink about what are the limitations and what are the potentials of design thinking. I know that this may be a huge sort of a canvas for you all right now, but I cannot talk about design thinking without talking about its limitations. So what I'll do is I just gave you these as references, but and both of these books have a really rich history of how design thinking has evolved and how that evolution of design thinking is extremely political. But I'll go and explain this in a small little project that I have been doing so that it becomes a bit more clear, I hope. So this, for example, is a device. It's called as my.flow. You can go to this website, Track My Flow, to look at it. This is a device for women to menstruating people to manage their menstruation. Now, this is a Silicon Valley corporation, and they have it is led by a woman scientist who is menstruating, and it is from their experience. They have a strong design team. They have a lot of funding, and if you look at their videos, they talk about how they have figured out one of the most important problems of women who are menstruating. And one of the biggest problem that they found out is that the overflow of the pads, and how the stains are deeply stigmatic in the society that we live. And this is America, sorry. So the stigma is not just in India; it's everywhere, even in the American corporate world. So this product is for women in menstruating people in American corporate world. So basically, this is a tampon which has an inbuilt sensor that connects to your phone, and it kind of, the sensor tells you when you have to replace your tampon based on the flow that you have. It also has health benefits because, of course, we should not leave tampons inside. But I doubt if any woman forgets to leave their pads behind. They do replace. The body knows it. But anyway, the idea is that the solution is that the sensor sends you a message on your phone, and you know when you have to replace the tampon, so that there's no overflow and there's no stain on your clothes, and you're saved a stigma. Right now, this is a very good example of a design thinking, human-centered design process where there's a very concrete problem which is usually not addressed. How many products are out there for women hygiene, and the government is not even ready to make it as a free public good. So when a technology team invests so much of money in trying to solve it, and they go through a human-centered design process to understand where the problem is. And I think that's a brilliant example. But at the same time, what it doesn't focus is why that stain is a problem. Where is that problem coming from? Because that problem is coming from the society, right? It's not the problem of an individual. It's the society's problem. And this is the problem of design, because design, we usually, especially design thinking, it lacks system thinking. It focuses on an individual and puts the onus and responsibility on that individual, rather than looking at problems as systemic. So I'll give you, I'll show an alternative. So for me, then what is important is, and this goes back to the process that we just discussed. So I'll come back to this notion of designing in a bit. So I talked about Lakshmi Murthy, right? And Lakshmi Murthy runs an organization, women's collective called as Ugair. She's also part of this organization called as Jatan Sansthan, which is an NGO. But Ugair is a cooperative where they create cotton sanitary napkins and help women to make them and sell them. But these are templates that anybody can make. During this COVID time, we used the same templates, and we made videos for others to make their own sanitary napkins in rural parts. And the design of this has evolved over decades. That Lakshmi Murthy's study, and she actually did her PhD from IIT Bombay on this product of hers, and proved that it is far more sustainable than any other product out there, both in terms of health of the women and in terms of its degradation, ecological sustainability. And the important thing here is that it's a basic kind of a liner that they can put and wrap around your underwear, and there's some sort of cotton inserts to soak up the blood and tissues. And the thing is, let me see. Yeah, okay. So the thing is, now the way that Lakshmi Murthy and the team have designed it is, it's of course it's a product that they make and sell, but it's also a do-it-yourself kit that anybody can download from their website and make your own. It's not IP protected. There's nothing new about this. This is just, she's taken and given shape for a culture that has always been there, but she's made some key changes, right? One thing here is that the cotton inserts are always white. She has faced immense pushback from not from rural women, but from urban women, and mostly from corporate CSR agencies to make the inserts in color. But Lakshmi has not done that. The reason being two reasons. One is it's always important to look at what is the color of the discharge, because then that reveals and it indicates the health of the woman. Right, so the white here is a smart sensor. Compare this now to the sensor that we saw in that product from the Silicon Valley. And second, that you need to wash it and dry it in the sun. That's where it becomes hygienic. And when you do it in a household, it becomes out there visible. And what does that do is that it provokes conversation. And it's only through conversation that the society's perception about what is menstruation and the stigma around it will change, right? Only through those household conversations, right? We can all go and watch Padman, but nothing will come out of it unless we have these day-to-day conversations in our households, where the non-menstruating men go ahead and wash those inserts and keep it to dry, and the children look at it, and the gender is then the status quo of what it is to be a woman and what it is to be a man changes. So this is the vision that comes about through design, right? So that for me is deeply inspirational. And what we do, and this is going back to the workshop that we do in Udaipur. These are series of both my student on this side and then on those three young men, 17 years old, who for the first time have encountered what is menstruation and are stitching the cotton pads for the women in their house. They're all engaged and married. In fact, 17 years old. They were engaged when they were 2 years old, and then they got married when they were 17 years old. And my students here are stitching it for their mothers, for their sisters, and for their girlfriends, right? And through this activity of doing, through stitching and making and giving it new forms, they're also understanding what is menstruation and what is the stigma around it and how they can challenge it. So the activity of designing something then becomes an activity, an action of questioning something. And for me, that is very powerful. So it becomes a way of collaboration and learning. Okay, I'm going to skip this because this is a whole lot of things here now. And I know that I've kind of pushed a lot of new ideas on you. But I'm going to skip this. I'll come to this. So in continuation with what Lakshmi Murthy has done, I also work with another organization called as Maya in Bangalore and Chenpatna. And they train health workers to be micro entrepreneurs. And these health workers are part of the community, and they go and manage about 300 people, households, and help them to manage their diabetes and hypertension in a place like Chenpatna and surrounding villages. You would be surprised, and I was surprised, when you would know that in a locality of about a square kilometer, there would be around 300 to 400 households with people facing diabetes and hypertension. In a place like Chenpatna, you would imagine that diabetes is an urban phenomenon, but no, it is there, out there. So what these women, trained women, do is to manage their data, help them with their diet, help them with their exercise, and motivate them to stay healthy, and for a small amount of fee. And the women have started earning about 3,000 to 4,000 rupees per month. And I have been working with them to equip them with design thinking abilities, because because they're micro entrepreneurs, they have to anticipate the community needs and then see how they can solve them. And they actually don't need design thinking. They have their own ways and approaches of creative problem solving, right? So they have been, and what you see in this image is they have come up with an idea for helping the households to manage their diet and food intake. And this idea of an app is a very local one, so where only what is consumed in the household is tracked and discussed, and there's no kind of standardized that you need to eat 200 calories or 300 calories or 1 cup of rice, because what is a cup in one house is a mug in another house. So because the health workers know each household very intimately, they use technology, and this is just a mock-up. It's not a product yet, but they use technology to understand the nuances of day-to-day food habits of each household and help the individual to shift one little thing, right? So they make a promise of, I'll reduce 1 cup of coffee for the next month, and let's see how that goes, rather than a nutritionist coming and telling you to eat millets, make 500 grams of millets. What is a millet, right? But if you say it's a ragi, then there's a different altogether, right? And when we were doing this, what emerged was there's this brilliant, beautiful discussion between the health worker and this woman here about the size of the keema ball that this woman loves to eat, mutton keema. And she has to makes it 3 times a week. She has to have it 3 times a week for both lunch and dinner. There's a negotiation between the health worker and the woman saying that, hey, can you eat it just once, eat it for just lunch? Like, no, I need to have it both lunch and dinner. Can you make it just twice a week? Like, no, 3 times a week. Okay, how many balls do you eat? She says 2. Can you make it 1 ball? She's like, no, that's not. And then it all came down to what is the size of a ball. And then the woman says it's like an narangi size, it's like an orange. And then the health worker says, maybe if you want to do it, you can do it as a lemon size, reduce the size. Will that work? And then the woman says, that could work. Let me try that. So this sort of negotiation is something that design thinking cannot teach, right? So this is an alternative approach that comes to, and it is design, but it is a process where this process can only work if there is no product that has designed and kept out there, but it's about continuously designing it together. So this is how I started off saying that this is design thinking, where you move from a current state to a preferred state, right? And you anticipate this vision, this future, you make a product, you keep it out there, and then the problem is solved. But I would argue that in order to address the limitations and problems of design thinking, we need to think of designing as a never-ending process. And this goes back to the question that I was asked in the break, right? So for me, design never ends. Understanding of a problem and trying to find creative solutions to it never ends. And that's why we need to see who gets to design this. Who is a designer? In my context, it's the health workers who are out there who's designing. I'm just trying to equip them with the tools so that they can design better. Right. So this brilliant diagram is from Bill Buxton, who wrote Sketching User Experiences. He's a senior Microsoft researcher. So for me, this is very important. So it's a collaborative, situated exploratory process of constantly tinkering what is possible. What is the problem? What is the solution? And it never ends. So going back to this story, my contention is that this vision of a concern for a cow can only come from people who have grown with cows, who lived with cows. Otherwise, you would treat cows as a stray dog problem and categorize them elsewhere. And that's why it's very important to temper our design thinking with systems thinking, as well as a deep sort of a notion of care and empathy for that can only come, and this is my condition, this can only come if you have experienced it, right? And you need to find such people and work with them. So that's where I'm going to stop right now. I've talked a lot, and I know I'm aware that I may have pushed a lot of new concepts or new thoughts here, but I'm kind of hoping that we would have some time to discuss this in some detail now. Yeah, if you have any questions, any thoughts, we can come back to the slides, but I'm going to stop the sharing now.
Dear participants, if you have any queries, please unmute yourself. Ma'am, can you be little louder?
I think they were having a conversation with someone
Yeah.
else.
Mute her, sir. Mute her. Dear participants, if you have any queries, please unmute yourself or you can drop your queries in the chat box.
Sir, good afternoon.
Yes, hi.
The question is that when you referred your education in IDC 2007, so I just curious that was design
Uh,
thinking.
Nitin, just a minute. There's a bit of a. I
Unmute her
can.
just a minute.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please go ahead, Nitin.
Yes, I just want to ask when you studied in IDC in 2007, was this discipline of say or the area design thinking that was informally there, if I'm not wrong, in 1995 or 2000, but in 2007 was it explored in the way you're talking right now, or it has evolved after 95 or 2000 or 2007?
Yeah, no. So, I mean, IDC still does design thinking in the way that IDEO talks about, right? In the way that that I talked about in the Rangoli phone thing, which is there's a problem. I mean, there's a set of people out there. You are a designer. You have a brief from a client. You go and understand your target audience. You look at their problems and you try to solve them through design, creative design, and then you make a product or you make a system or you make a service. That is a predominant, not only in IDC, that's a predominant design status everywhere in the world right now. That's the mainstream.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Participants, anyone?
There's a question in the chat. How well was your workshop on sanitary napkins were productive? I would like to know more about what do you mean by productive? How do you define productive?
Renuka ma'am, are you there?
Okay. Just a clarifying. So the workshops that I did was not that we designed the sanitary napkins. The design is by Lakshmi, and Ugair is a very well-known brand in for those who are looking at sustainable menstrual management. And then they now have also acceptance from Assam government and the Rajasthan state government, and a lot of organizations also use the same product to as part of the CSR initiatives, where it's not just a product, but it's also about education. And these workshops are conducted by Lakshmi Murthy's organization, Jatan Sansthan. For us, the workshop was more of an education opportunity of both learning about bodies, learning about stigmas around bodies, but also learning about design and taking a more humble notion of what is design. And in that, the workshop has always been productive because my master students, these are, I take the second, the third semester master students, and when they go there and they come back, they've changed. Their notions of design have changed, and they go through a lot of struggle because the mainstream jobs where they go are not ready for this kind of a notion of design. So they struggle, but my goal is to ask my students to ask these questions about design, and the workshop gives me that opportunity to do that. In that sense, the workshop is very productive.
Sir, there is another question from my side.
Yeah.
When you see design, there are another approach that people say it's avant-garde, and it's exactly opposite to the empathy or caring approach. So, what do you think about that angle of design, avant-garde.
Avagai, what does that mean? Can you? I'm not familiar with that.
Avangard, avant-garde, right?
Avant-garde. Okay. Yeah. 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 No. Oh, yeah. Definitely. I came from. I studied architecture, so no. I have deep problems with that. So I always have issues with that aspect of it's very prominent in architecture, less so in product design. Also because product design has to sell, isn't it? Product design, people have to use it in order to for corporations to make money. So they cannot be sort of this avant-garde where architects can be like Franco Gehry and Zahadi. Then they can create these huge, kind of spaces uh, without an understanding of context, and it's absolutely unempathetic in so many different ways. Um, I think for me personally, I don't think so. That's design, right? I don't consider it as design at all. So unless you are using that space to provoke the society some deep questions. For example, there is an interesting strand of design that has emerged since a couple of decades called a speculative and critical design from RCA, but there are also others who do that, which is Anup Jain in Austria, Indian origin, NIT, but now in London and in Austria, she has a firm called as Superflux. Has done some really phenomenal work using this avant-garde kind of an approach where I present a vision of a future that is very radical, but that in speculative and critical design, that vision opens up more questions rather than solving. And that's, I think, very interesting too.
Can you just name Superflux?
Superflux. Yeah, I just mentioned in the chat. Anup Jain, just a minute.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. There's one more question here. The process of product design should start with consumer needs or innovation or change in the design. Does it go hand in hand? Usually, the product design starts from, my experience is that there's a tech out there and it needs a problem. And then they come to designers saying that, hey, find a market for us and give us, don't close it. So find a market for us and give us, make this into product. So the tech is already there. And then the innovation comes in giving it a form in such a way that more and more people use it, right? And design is part of that. Why did you switch off the camera? I'm almost done. Okay, 5 more minutes. So did I answer that question, Rasika ma'am? Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions?
Participants, any other questions? You can
Maybe
unmute yourself or you can drop it in your chat box.
Thank you. Maybe one